بداية أشكركم جزيل الشكر، وأشكر الأستاذ خالد التلمساني، هو أستاذ بجامعة عبد المالك السعدي ورئيس المؤسسة للجمعية المغربية للسلامة الحيوية وعضو مؤتمر الأطراف داخل الوفد المغربي وأمين عام لمؤسسة بيت المناخ المتوسطي. سيتحدث اليوم على موضوع مهم جدا: دور الجهات الفاعلة غير الحكومية في جدول أعمال تغيير المناخ العالمي. سأعطي مقدمة وبعدين إذا سمحتم سأعطيه الكلمة. في مؤتمر الأمم المتحدة لتغيير المناخ يتم اتخاذ العديد من القرارات الدولية الرئيسية بشأن تغيير المناخ. سمعنا الأمين العام للأمم المتحدة أنطونيو غوتيريس في مؤتمر الأمم المتحدة الخامس والعشرون الذي عقد في مدريد إسبانيا في 2019 قال إنه محبط من نتائج المؤتمر، وأن المجتمع الدولي فقد فرصة مهمة لإظهار الطموح المتزايد بشأن التخفيف والتكييف والتمويل لمعالجة أزمة المناخ. ماذا يجب أن نفهمه في هذه السياسة؟ نحن محظوظون بوجود معنا عضو في جامعة التعليم الافتراضي الأستاذ خالد التلمساني من أعضاء الوفد المغربي حول المناخ، وهو الأمين العام سأقوله من جديد للمؤسسة بين المناخ المتوسطي، ويتابع عن كثب جميع القضايا التي تتعلق بمؤتمر الأطراف والتغييرات المناخية. الأستاذ خالد باحث عرف كيف يوفق بين مهنته كأستاذ باحث في الكيمياء والتحديات البيئية، وسيلقي مؤتمرا تمهيديا لمنهجه الأكاديمي كجزء من أنشطته الطوعية، فهو متطوع في جامعة التعليم الافتراضي. سوف يسلط الضوء على موضوع تحت عنوان دور الجهات الفعالة غير الحكومية في جدول أعمال تغيير المناخ العالمي. الأستاذ خالد التلمساني يرغب في استخدام مهاراته لمساعدة الطالب على فهم العلوم للتأثير على القرار السياسي. إذا فهمت نيابة عن جميع أعضاء الجامعة الافتراضية وشركائها سبائك، إيغيزن، مركز المنارات للدراسة والأبحاث. أشكر الأستاذ خالد لحضوره معنا ودعمه للتنمية المستدامة في المغرب. The floor is yours, Professor Khalid. I will leave the screen and I will leave it for you. So please go ahead.
شكرا صديقي وزميلي الدكتور أحمد الناوي على هذه الكلمات. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، وصلى الله وسلم على سيدنا محمد أشرف المرسلين. شكرا لك وشكرا لدكتور سالم وجميع الإخوة الذين يشتركون معنا في هذا الصباح. أنا سعيد جدا صراحة أنني أولا نكون ضمن هذا الفريق المتميز والراقي من هذا الخبراء الدوليين المهتمون لا سيما متعلق بالعلوم الإنسانية والسياسية والقانونية في إطار ما نسميه بالجامعة التعلم الافتراضي، اللي هي حقيقة فكرة جميلة جدا ونتمنى لها كل التوفيق والنجاح تحت الرعاية القريبة والمهنية لزميلي السي أحمد الناوي. بعد التقديم هذا إذا سمحت، إذا ما فيش هناك كلمات أخرى سأشرع في محاضرتي هذا الصباح، وأعتذر للزملاء والإخوان والطلبة وجميع اللي هما حاضرين معنا اليوم أن المحاضرة تاعي غادي تكون باللغة الإنجليزية نظرا لتعدد واختلاف الحاضرين. فغادي نحاول كما طلب مني صديقي الدكتور سالم أنني في نفس الوقت مرة نتكلم باللغة العربية، على أن اللغة العربية تاعنا في المغرب شوية ماشي مفهومة 100% في دول الشرق الأوسط والعالم العربي. فعلى بركة الله غادي نبدأ المحاضرة ديالي. Let me start by sharing my screen and you tell me if everything is okay.
Everything is okay.
Thank you so much. Okay. Eden. Today I have the pleasure to present to you a modest talk about an angle related to the policy or the international policy of climate change. This angle is related to a group of stakeholders that generally are behind the scene. I'm underlining this behind the scene because generally when we speak about climate change and negotiations and let's say the outcomes from the conference of parties, generally we hear from official individuals representing either their respective governments or from officials representing the United Nations Convention Framework on Climate Change, the UNFCCC. These individuals, what I call the non-state actors, is going to be the focus today of my talk. So let's start by looking at some outlines of my speech today. First of all, I will speak a little bit about the climate change diplomacy journey. Then I will follow that by some sort of explanation about the meaning of the non-state actors, what we call generally NSA. And then the role of those NSA within the UNFCCC process. I will follow that by one of my favorite organizations out there that is following the processes of the negotiations, and it is called the CAT, the Climate Action Tracker. And you will see why I prefer this organization, because the accuracy of the data that coming from that system is very, very important for decision making. I will also say a few words about the various IPCC's report, then focus my speech in the second part on what the Kingdom of Morocco, my country, is doing towards enhancing ambition in the climate change process. And some words about the climate finance, because this is the most important part to deploy our national policies in this field. And we'll finish by the Nazca platform, which is a UNFCCC non-state actors zone for climate action. This is what we call Nazca. And finish definitely by what the non-state actors could do in the next COP26 in Glasgow that will take place actually by the end of this month. So this is an important component. So first of all, we people that are living in the Mediterranean region and the Middle East region are facing extreme events, natural events due to the adverse effects of climate change. And the climate change is now recognized as being a factor that is, or a multiplying factor that is affecting the stability of our region. We have evidence, scientific evidence of sea level rise with data. It's centimeters. We are talking about centimeters increase in the next decade, which will affect, like you will see, some regions of this world and some zones or coastal zones of the Mediterranean region. The Mediterranean and the Arab region is a climate change hotspot, as it has been recognized and documented by the MEDEC, the Mediterranean Expert Group for Climate Change, in one side, and the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change, on the other side. We have increased weather events. We have a decline in precipitation in our region. We have temperature increases, and all these events that are related to climate change will compromise the stability in the Arab region and in the Mediterranean region. And this is very important to underline. Now, if I go to the climate change diplomacy journey, some people will say that if we look at the first Earth Summit held back in 1992 in Rio de Janeiro, and now we're almost heading 2022, it's been almost 30 years of discussion, diplomatic negotiations. We are heading to the 26th COP in Glasgow next month. What have the international community done to overcome this extremely serious issue that the humanity is going to face? What have we done in 30 years of negotiation? A lot of things has been done. If you look at this slide here, you will see that at least my country, Morocco, has been quite active in this process by organizing twice 2 COPs. The first one in 2001 in Marrakesh, that was COP7, and the second one in 2016, that was COP22. So Morocco has been extremely active in this process. But if you look at the details, or if you read in between the lines, you will see that from 1992 to now, several scientific reports have been there, and they were alarming, and they were triggering the international community to say, hey, the world is heating very fast. And if I look at the, of course, I'm sort of going fast, but I'm sorry about that. But let's say that the first protocol or international agreement that was there, and it was a sort of legally binding document, was the Kyoto Protocol that was put in place in 1997 and entered into force in 2005. And the first elements to make it happen were discussed in Marrakesh in 2001. So the Kyoto Protocol was a sort of a top-down approach in which the UNFCCC said to the international community, or to the developed countries, hey, you should stop emitting CO2 if we want to keep our temperature not high enough, so the environment will be degraded and the well-being of the humanity will be also affected. So that was the Kyoto Protocol, and there were some details in this protocol in which the countries had to decrease their emissions by 5% until the period 2015. That was the first segment of the Kyoto Protocol, and then we had the second phase until 2020. But now, if we look at the 4th IPCC report back in 2008, it was just ahead of COP15 in Copenhagen. It was one of the famous COPs in Copenhagen in 2009. So the 4th IPCC's report said that the heating of the globe, of the Earth, should not go beyond 2 degrees Celsius. That was the red line that was announced by the 4th IPCC's report. And the 2 degrees C meant or means that the concentration or the atmospheric concentration in our around the globe do not need to go or to be beyond 450 ppm of CO2. This is a landmark. This is very important. And now actually we are almost around 420 ppms. So this is very, very threatening and scary. So that was back in 2008. And in Copenhagen in 2009, the international community recognized for the first time that the developed countries are not the bigger emitters in terms of greenhouse gases, but they are suffering from that those emissions. And the word adaptation started to be recognized for the first time in Copenhagen. And in terms of mitigation, the COP at that time introduced two elements that are the NAMAs, the national actions for mitigations, and the MRVs, which are the monitoring, reporting, and verification mechanism. And the third part is the financial mechanism that have been put in place by the COP, and it was for the developed countries to put on the table billions of dollars to help developing countries to overcome the adverse effects of climate change. So some figures have been discussed in Copenhagen, and let's say that one of the objective was to reach at that time $100 billion by 2020, and which we have never reached. And the transfer of technology from the north to the south was a component, a very important component that needed to be implemented at that time. But after that period, we had several COPs, and the most, let's say, the most important COP that entered into history was COP21 in France, where all the international community and all the state parties that are parties to the international convention became parties to what we call the Paris Agreement. So the Paris Agreement entered into force almost after COP21, or after ahead of COP22 in Marrakesh. So it was back in September 2016. And in Marrakesh, we started discussing the elements to put in place the Paris Agreement. Then we had COP24 in Poland, and there the COP established what we call the Katowice package. The Katowice package is a sort of guidelines and the tools to put in place the Paris Agreement. And then some elements in the Katowice package could not be discussed in Madrid in COP25. And I would personally say, sorry to say that COP25 in Madrid was the COP of lost opportunities, because we were not able to accomplish all the elements of the Katowice package in order to start implementing the Paris Agreement, unfortunately. And we hope that in the COP next month in Glasgow, we will finish discussing this and start implementing, because we are in the cycle of renewing or updating our NDCs and starting a new cycle of NDCs. So let's say a few words to finish this slide. So there was a commitment to stay in 2 degrees C in Copenhagen. Unfortunately, the temperature is now above 1 degree C. The cost of inactivation is between 5 to 20% of the global GDP. We have almost 400 million vulnerable people that are living under 1 meter, less than 1 meter from the sea level. And imagine if the sea level started to increase rapidly, some small developing islands in the Pacific might disappear. And that was the big flagship that was raised in Paris back in 2016 by those countries to say, hey, 2000 degrees is not working for us. We need to go below 2 degrees C. We need to at least stay around 1.5 degrees C. So beside the fact that hundreds of millions of people migrate every year because of climate change, you can understand that this is a serious issue. So there are very rapidly, there are three complementary but separate UN commitments that every country needs to abide to. There are the 17 Sustainable Development Goals that have a horizon of 2030. We have, as I said, the Paris Agreement that has a horizon of the end of the century, 2100. And we have the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction that we don't speak about a lot, but it is a very important component of the three UN frameworks that every country needs to abide to. And this one, the Sendai Framework, has a 2030 horizon. And imagine the countries, especially the developing countries, that needs to say a word, that needs to report, that needs to be in agreement with all these frameworks, with limited resources, either financial resources and human resources. So imagine how a country has to deal with those three elements. So that's a real burden. The ambition related to the Paris Agreement is, first of all, at 2050, all the world, all the countries that have ratified the Paris Agreement, and there are around 148 countries, need to tailor and need to establish and need to put in place and need to start implementing a net zero emission and climate resilience policy and strategy. This is not easy. We will say later how we can achieve that. We need money, we need human resources, we need political will. But while waiting for this middle century landmark, every 5 years, countries need to update their national determined contributions, which is one of the legally binding component, an important one of the Paris Agreement. The national determined contribution is one of the most legally binding component of the agreement. And therefore, countries that have ratified the Paris Agreement had to submit their first NDC, what we call first national determined contribution, or INDC if they are just intended to contribute to the lowering their emissions. So we have now a number of countries that have already submitted their updated or communicated their updated NDCs to the Secretariat of the UNFCCC ahead of COP26 in Glasgow. But then the next cycle will come in 2025, 2030, etc., etc. And in between, we will have a global stocktake. That means that we will have to have a global meeting in which we need to do a stocktake of all contributions that have been submitted, do a calculation and see whether or not we are hitting the landmark or the temperature goal of 1.5 degrees C of the Paris Agreement. Now, what does the non-state actors means? Now we enter into the subject. So in general, non-state actors, NSA, are a wide range of development actors other than governments. Very, very important. You cannot be an NSA if you are a ministry or a government entity. So this will include the private sector, economic and social partners, including the local community, local authorities, local municipalities, universities. So universities are a very important component of NSA, the civil society, etc., etc. So the contributions of those non-state actors in terms of actions related to decreasing emissions or to adaptation or to climate finance or to transfer of technology, etc., etc. All the things that are related to the Paris Agreement that are being taken care of by those non-state actors should be accounted, should be registered somewhere. And unfortunately, many non-state actors are not even aware of what we call the Nazca platform. And I will say a word at the end of this speech about the Nazca platform. The Nazca platform is the non-state actor zone for climate action. So this is very important. So the process from COP21 to COP24 and beyond is related to some signals that has been launched by the COP toward the work or the important work that the non-state actors can do to close the gap of emissions that are being accounted of. In COP21, a strong signal was launched toward more ambitious climate action by all parties and non-party stakeholders. In COP22, we have the famous launching of the Marrakesh Partnership for Global Climate Action. Unfortunately, in the Arab world, in North Africa, in the MENA region, we do not advocate a lot, sorry to say that, we do not advocate a lot for the Marrakesh Partnership for Global Climate Action, which is a section of the UNFCCC that is englobing all the actions in the climate change by those actors and will be accounted for. And it is a partnership or an initiative that is coming from an Arab country, Morocco in this case. So Arab countries should advocate for this initiative that comes from the south and not coming from the north. So I close this parenthesis and I will continue in COP23. According to the fifth UN report that was released ahead of COP23, it has been shown that the commitment by the countries at the national level represent only a third of the emission reduction needed by 2030. This is crazy. This means that all the efforts that has been made and shown and submitted by countries to the Secretariat of the UNFCCC, when we do a calculation of how much greenhouse gas emissions those initiatives, those official initiatives will decrease, it's only 1/3 of the emissions. Therefore, the actions or the complementary or the other actions taken by the private sector, by subnational level, by non-state actors, become very, very important. And this is maybe one of the most important messages from my talk today. Now, in this UNFCCC process, we had, after COP22 in Marrakesh, it was the role of the Fiji Island to organize the COP23. But the Fiji Islands decided at the end that the COP will be held in Berlin, but under the Fiji presidency. So in order to increase the action of the non-state actors within the UNFCCC process, the Fiji Island presidency decided to call, to establish what it is called the Talanoa Dialogue. The Talanoa Dialogue is a traditional Fiji word that means inclusiveness, participatory approach, transparent dialogue process. So in Fiji Island, they sit around all stakeholders and start discussing and in a participatory way and try to find solutions to the issues that the world is facing. So they share stories, they develop empathy and make wise decisions for the collective good. So the dialogue began in January 2018 and almost it lasts a year long. And in this dialogue, in which all the stakeholders were invited to attend, either party or non-party, non-stake actors, they had to sit around in different groups and to discuss and to give responses to the three questions that you have here. Where are we in terms of trajectory of the greenhouse gas emissions? Where do we want to go? What is our goal? What is our objective? And finally, how can we get there? Very important. If we want to stay below 2 degrees C, if we want to keep 1.5 degrees C as a end of century mean global temperature, how can we achieve that? So this Talanoa dialogue were divided in different groups. Each group consisted of 35 participants. 30 participants were government, and 5 participants in each group were non-state actors. So it's not a very good percentage, but at least the non-state actors were sitting beside the governments and they had a voice. They could say something. So the Talanoa dialogue concluded with a call for action in which, like you see in this picture, a mix between non-state actors, government representatives, they were mixed, they were all together for a call that was directed at international governments, international agencies, non-party stakeholders, civil society, spiritual leaders, and youth. Everybody was concerned about this call. What was the major or key messages of this call? First, we must fulfill the goals of the Paris Agreement. So everybody agreed that we need to work all together toward the Paris Agreement. And then, second, we must achieve a just transformation towards a better world. This word, just transformation, means that we need a justice, a climate justice, when we do some energy transformation, development transformation, economy transformation. It's a long debate. It is a long debate because if the northern countries have developed their economies, their living, their quality of life by using fossil fuels, by using all sort of coal and all, and they have polluted our atmosphere. Now that the southern countries, developed countries, are about to develop themselves, we are telling them, oh, stop. You cannot use coal, you cannot use fossil fuels, you can use nothing. You have to stop emitting. So this is not justice. So this is what the Talanoa dialogue, we must achieve a just transformation toward a better world. And then we must unlock the full potential of technology. The developing world needs technology in photovoltaic cells, in wind technology, in green hydrogen, in transportation, etc., etc. But at the same time, and I was one of the ones as a negotiator during COP22 to say, hey, the technology transfer should be balanced. We can have something from the north as transfer of technology, but in the southern countries, we have also some ancestral knowledge, ancestral technology in the water management, in the building sector, etc., that our grandfathers used to use. We can sell it to the north too. So we need to balance this transfer of technology. It's another debate. We must also demonstrate bold leadership. And finally, the Talanoa dialogue said, we must act together. This is very, very important. Okay? Now, if we look at the 2030 emissions gap presented, of course, by my favorite organization, which is the Climate Action Tracker, and we have the website here. I will go fast with this slide because I don't want to take a lot of time. But let's say that if we want to stay under 1.5 degrees C Paris Agreement goal, the pledged targets by the countries are there. Okay. So the NDCs that has been submitted in September 2020 leave us with a gap of 23 to 27 gigaton CO2 equivalent. This gap means that in order for us or for the globe, let's put it this way, as a chemist, I would say, let's say, if I want to keep my concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere with 450 ppm, okay? So I still have 23 to 27 gigaton CO2 that is there. I need to decrease it. So I need to work for that. So that's the September 2020 updated NDC. Now, in May 2020, many countries, and this will be one of the work that the COP26 in Glasgow needs to do, is to do an accounting of all the recently updated national determined contributions, in which basically the countries had to increase their ambition in terms of actions to decrease more and more their emissions. So if we look at the May 2021 update, the gap has been narrowed a little bit by 2.6 to 3.9 gigaton CO2 equivalent, 40%. So the gap is being narrowed, which is good, but it's not sufficient. It's not sufficient. This is very important to reach our temperature goal. Now, the climate action tracker also shows that now, and this is scaring, really scaring, sorry to say that, we are here. 1.2 degrees C warming. That was last year, and remember, all over the news, on the TVs, international TVs, everybody was saying 2020 was the hottest year in the last, in this decade, okay? So we are at 1.2, and 1.5 degrees C is very, very near. So this will trigger, or should trigger, the international community to say, we are not on the right track to reach the temperature goal of the Paris Agreement. This is important to say. So the current policies that we are seeing by the countries will head us to 2.5 degrees C. The pledges and the targets presented via the various NDCs of the countries will head us to 2.4 degrees C. That's not good. The optimistic target is 2.0 degrees C. So this temperature barometer should engage us, all of us, in a sort of debate to see what our respective countries are doing toward the climate change issue. The IPCC 1.5 degrees C special report that was ordered by COP21 21 in Paris, this report showed that the renewable energy, in order for us to reach 1.5 degrees C, renewables must make up half of the global energy mix by 2050. And coal needs to be out of the power sector altogether by then. So here, the focus, the political focus, and the technical focus needs to be on coal. What are our respective countries are doing to do the phase out, the complete phase out from coal? Because more than 40% of the greenhouse gas emissions around the globe are due to the coal power plant. Second, to limit the global warming to 1.5 degrees C, CO2 emissions need to fall by about 45% by 2030. This means that it is 9 years or 8 years from now. Are we able to decrease our emissions by 45%? We have only 8 years. That's another issue. The global warming to 1.5 means that CO2 emissions will need to reach net zero around 2050. 2050, and we need to reduce also non-CO2 emissions in order to have a direct and immediate, to avoid an immediate effect on human health. So the IPCC 1.5 report is very clear in its confirmation that the wide-ranging impact of climate change is much worse at 2 degrees C than 1.5 degrees C. That means that the small islands, countries that were really furious back in 2015 in Paris, they were right, and they were saying the truth. 1.5 degrees C is the only way for all of us to continue living in a normal world without harm. Now, remember, last August 2021, there was the release of the famous 6th assessment report of the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change, IPCC. And I have put for you here the most important key messages that we need to keep in mind before heading COP26 in Glasgow. First of all, thank you, sorry. The human influence has caused climate change and led to more frequent extreme events, such as the one that I have discussed at the beginning of this talk. Droughts, heavy rainfall, etc., etc. So human influence, the humanity is responsible of what we have reached now. That's a scientific report. Second, we now have better estimates of the sensitivity of the climate system to carbon dioxide. So now we can measure carbon dioxide, and we can link mathematically the increase of temperature to increase of carbon dioxide. We are accurate, it's accurate measurements, accurate sensitivity. This is science. 3, even under the most aggressive emission reduction scenario, the world will continue to warm until at least 2050. So we'll continue facing heat waves, extreme weather events, etc., until 2050. But we need to work to avoid, to diminish the risk, to have the minimum risk possible for the population. Carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is additive. That's chemistry. Carbon dioxide is additive, and every ton of carbon dioxide warms the planet. And the IPCC predicts 16% increase in GHGs in 2030. And finally, there is still time to avoid dangerous climate change, and we need to continue working for that. And just one thing, if we want to achieve this 45% decrease of our greenhouse gas emission by 2030, scientists are saying that means, concretely speaking, that we need to decrease every year our emissions, every year, by 7.6%. Do you imagine that? Every year, the world globally needs to decrease its emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, by 7.6% if we want to reach the goal of 45% decrease by 2030. Let's look at the global greenhouse gas emissions, and it's a reverse pyramid, and you will see that in 2020, China was the most biggest emitter in the world, 28% of global greenhouse gas emissions, followed by the USA 15%, EU 9.3%, India 6%, Russia 4%, Japan 4%, Germany 2%, France 1%, and Morocco, I give an example of Morocco, 0.16%, which is almost 121 million ton equivalent CO2 per year. That was in 2020. But if I look at I have a paper, inshallah, that will be released about this subject by the end of this year, 2021. And this paper, I made it with an international organization, is related to the overall study, a review of the MENA region NDCs, and see how they are evolving since the beginning until now, after 5 years of the Paris Agreement. So this is extracted from this paper that will be released, inshallah, in December. But we see here how in 2019 the CO2 emissions of 16 countries are. So to make it simple and not to alarm people, I would just say that we are not big emitters compared to the other countries. The 16 countries presented here, that's Algeria, Bahrain, Egypt, State of Palestine, Jordan, Kuwait, Lebanon, Libya, Mauritania, Morocco, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Tunisia, Turkey, and United Arab Emirates. All those countries together, they only emit less than 6% of the world total emission. If I go back here, less than 6%. That means we are somewhere around India. Only India is emitting all the 16 countries that I have presented. So we are not a lot of emitters, but we are still there. We are contributing to the emissions, global emissions. And you see here, we have five countries that are one of the biggest emitters: Saudi Arabia, followed by Turkey, Egypt, United Arab Emirates, and Algeria. And then we have Morocco here, Tunisia, Kuwait, etc. So this to give you an idea about where are we as an Arab country. Now, if I go back to my favorite organization, the Climate Action Tracker, this CAT made an analysis of 33 countries around the world that you have here. And fortunately for Morocco, for my country, we are one of the countries here, according to this international organization, that we are under this category 1.5 Paris Agreement compatible. So one of the countries that are heading with their own strategies towards 1.5 degrees C is Morocco, because the country is continue developing a good climate policy to reduce its emissions, and the Morocco is expanding renewable energy sources. But the impact of the pandemic, COVID-19, remains unclear about the future of this trajectory. But it is estimated that, according to Climate Action Tracker, that Morocco emissions are expected to decrease by 10%, between 5 and 10%, between 2019 and 2010. So those are the 1.5 compatible, and we have one Arab country here, the UAE, that is highly which climate policy, according to the submitted NDC, is highly insufficient. Only one Arab country here, UAE, and one Arab country here, Morocco. So the process involving non-state actors, so the effective execution of current activities, as well as the intensification and introduction of voluntary new or strengthened activities, initiatives, and coalitions is important and is being collected at the NASCA platform, as I said earlier. We need to link initiatives and coalitions to national action plans. So I'm not saying here that the non-state actors' actions or climate actions have to be in silos. No, they need to work in harmony with government initiatives, government policies. So some interaction needs to be there. And this process will help parties and non-party stakeholders to obtain the recognition to which they aspire, because at the COPs, the non-state actors have an observer badge. So they go there with an observer badge, which makes sense, but they are not allowed to enter the rooms where the negotiations are taking place. But at least what we say is that there should be some spaces, some zones, in the blue zone. I'm talking about the blue zone, the negotiation zone at the COP. There should be some areas and zones where NSA and state parties can interact very in a tight manner to deploy some wording, some narrative, some argumentation that after then the negotiator will take, enter to the room of negotiations and inject it into the final text that will be approved by the state parties. This is the idea. This is the idea. Okay, let me continue. Now, the commitment of all state actors is important. That includes those launched under initially the Lima Paris action. Okay, and the urgent need to scale up the global response to climate change and to support leader ambition governments in order to close what I already explained, the 2023 gigaton emission gaps between current ambition levels and those that allow the Paris Agreement to be met by 2030. So now, the Marrakesh Partnership for Global Climate Action, this is what I discussed earlier, has been launched at the COP22 in Marrakesh to accelerate the climate action for the period 2017-2010, but then it has been institutionalized within the framework of the United Nations. So it's a space where state and non-state actors can be engaged in climate action within a single platform to build bridges and create connection between these actors. So the Marrakesh Partnership is intended to strengthen the implementation of commitments by non-state actors, and it is a new framework for monitoring and prioritizing climate action, expanding voluntary efforts, initiatives, and coalitions to engage in cooperative initiatives. Then we had, again at the COP22, the speech of His Majesty King Mohammed VI during the conference, the African Conference for Action held in Marrakesh, in which the king said literally that Morocco will animate a network or an African network of climate expertise by implementing what we call the 4C Maroc or 4C Morocco, which is the center of competences for climate change that has been put in place, and it was initially serving via 4 chapters the Moroccan Morocco, but then the king emitted a wish that the 4C Morocco will serve also the African continent by building capacity in the climate change field for those countries. So the vision of His Majesty the King was to strengthen the role, again, of non-state actors, companies, local authorities, scientific communities, and associations in the implementation of the national effort to reach the objectives of Morocco NDCs and all the rest. Now, back in 2017, the President Macron launched what he called the One Planet Summit, in which many chief of states were there and the prime minister were there, including civil society and non-state actors were there in Paris for this One Planet Summit. And there were 12 international commitments that has been released. And one of them is the commitment number 3, which is to mobilize research and youth in favor of the climate. This is very, very important. Why? Because after that, we had this commitment number 3 that has been taken care of by, for example, the Bill Gates Foundation in a joint action with the BNP Paribas, which is a French bank, to put in place $15 billion over the next 5 years to finance scholarship for students to do scientific research on the climate change field in some African countries or European countries. And then the EU, launched also Service Solidarité Européen, which is a service for the climate with an envelope of 40 billion euros to support initiatives in the research field for the climate action. So now I'm switching to what Morocco is doing. I'm sorry it's taking too long, but I'm almost in the final parts of my speech. Morocco, as I said earlier, have made a lot of things, a lot of commitments, either nationally, internationally, in the field of climate change, by putting in place national strategies for sustainable development, national strategies and policies for environmental protection. In the field of in the Paris Agreement arena, Morocco has submitted its first and its updated NDC in last June 2021, and we will see how the ambition has been increased by Morocco's NDCs in terms of mitigation. Morocco is about to finish working on the low emission development strategy, and this strategy will allow Morocco to have a clear vision to carbon neutrality by 2050. We have put in place a national governance about climate change, a national climate finance system, the 40 mark, I've already said that, a transfer of technology system, and Morocco has submitted its fourth national communication to the Secretariat of the United Nations, and Morocco is also finishing its national adaptation plan according to the requirement by the Secretariat. So the enhanced ambition of Morocco in terms of national determined contribution, as it has been submitted to the Secretariat of the United Nations on the 22nd of June, last 22nd of June. If you compare the first NDC that has been submitted in 2016 to the sorry, this is the 2020 mitigation objective. Let me just correct this. Okay. So we see that we went from minus 22 mitigation at the horizon.
I don't see anymore your presentation.
Sorry?
Your presentation is not visible anymore.
Okay, okay, sorry.
Maybe
Thank
you have to share again.
Let me let me see. Okay.
No, it's fine.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry about that.
Just go to the.
Yeah. So we switched from minus 22 mitigation ambition to minus 45.5 mitigation ambition, which is, according to the study I made, and as I said, it will be published very soon, before the end of this year, one of the most ambitious NDCs is the one presented by the Kingdom of Morocco, because it's fixed the mitigation target toward 2030 by 45.5%. That will require a climate finance budget of 38.8 million USDs, which will have an unconditional component and a conditional component. And as you will see, there is a strong commitment, a strong effort by the government of Morocco to decrease its greenhouse gas emissions, although they are not a lot. But the government is putting an envelope from the national budget of 17.3 billion USDs from now to 2030, which is a great effort from the government of Morocco toward the Paris Agreement. So those are some actions and some sectors that are covered by the new updated Moroccan NDC. And just a word about the distribution and the share of each sector to the 2030 ambition or the 2020 effort. You will see that since the energy sector or the electricity production is one of the highest emitter or greenhouse gas emitter, the effort of Morocco will go from 30% share of the electricity production to 26% share of electricity production that is responsible of greenhouse gas emissions. Do not confuse with the effort in the renewable energies, which is something different. Okay, and then you will see all the other sectors, the percentage and the share they have in the overall emissions. Now, another important things in the energy sector mix in Morocco, and just go directly here, if you don't mind, and look at the coal, the charbon, the coal share in the energy mix was 59% in 2018, and it decreases to 39% in 2019. For us as Moroccans and as Arabs, it is an important step toward phasing out coal, because coal is responsible of more than 40% of CO2 emissions. And this is an important thing to underline. In terms of financial aspect, the needs, as I said, are $38.8 billion in order for Morocco to reach the 2030 goal. But I didn't say a word about adaptation, because adaptation is another aspect in which we will need also money, US dollars. And for adaptation, Morocco will need $35 billion in terms of adaptation. And of course, part of it will be taken from the national budget, and another part will be international funding, for example, coming from the GCF and others, the Green Climate Fund. So in order to meet its climate finance needs, Morocco is actively preparing, this is important, to participate in the cooperative mechanism, climate market, which is the Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. This is one of the elements and the components of the Katowice package that was not agreed on and was left unresolved in Madrid. That's why I said that the COP in Madrid was the COP of the lost opportunities, because we did not manage to resolve the issue related to Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. Okay, and Morocco actually is launching several processes related to MRV of greenhouse gas emissions. So this is the transparency framework of the Paris Agreement, so monitoring, reporting, and verification. And second, the MRV of actions, including adaptation. And the last one, it is important, the MRV of support, because you are receiving support, international support, but you have to be transparent when using this support and when reporting about this support. And this is the Article 13 of the Paris Agreement. The NASCA zone, non-state actor zone for climate action, is a platform that provides visibility to companies about climate commitment and assess their ambitions. So if I look at the Morocco-related NASCA platform, Morocco, for example, has registered in the NASCA platform 45 actions. To be honest, this is not a lot of actions, because we have many more. But many state actors and non-state actors do not think about going to the platform and register their actions in the platform and put with this registration supporting evidence, because you need supporting evidence, a reference that these actions are really being taken care of. For example, if a territorial collectivity is changing all the lamps in the city by low emission or low consumption lamps in the streets, it's an action in favor of the climate. But why they are not registering these actions into this platform? This is a question that I'm raising here. So we have, for example, 16 cities that have registered 18 actions, 4 regions, 4 actions, 2 companies in Morocco, only 2 companies have registered 2 actions, 2 organizations, 2 actions, and 3 investors have registered 4 actions. And why this is important? Because those actions are transformed in the tons de CO2 évité, tons of CO2s that you did not emit. Those actions are equivalent to, mathematically speaking and scientifically speaking, to tons of CO2 that you did not release into the atmosphere by taking those actions. So then when we do the calculation of the overall actions, we will see whether or not the non-state actors are closing the gaps, the 20 and something gigaton CO2 of gaps that I have discussed earlier, if we are doing something for that gap, to close that gap or not, okay? So finally, what do we need to do at COP26 in Glasgow? Almost finishing. First of all, secure global net zero by mid-century in order to keep 1.5 degree close to at hand. For that, we need to accelerate the exit from the coal. We need to reduce deforestation. We need to accelerate the switch to electrical vehicles, very, very important. And we need to encourage all private sector and all non-state actors, investors, to invest in renewable energies. This is the only way to do that. Second, we need to adapt to protect communities and natural habitats. That's also important. We need to restore our ecosystems. We need to build defense, warning systems, resilience infrastructures. We need to mobilize funding to achieve our first 2 goals. And we need finally to work. When I say mobilize funding, the pledges are to start in 2020. Every year, the developed countries need to put on the table $100 billion until the end, at least until 2050, but hopefully the end of century. And those $100 billion yearly need to go to developed countries, to develop their economies, to develop their carbon-free economies, to develop their resilience, their adaptations, their infrastructure, etc., etc. Until now, we have only collected around $80 billion coming from the developed countries. The $100 billion are really far from to be reached. And finally, we need to work together. We need to finalize the Paris rule book. Very, very important. The Paris rule book, which is related to the Katowice package, has detailed rules to make the Paris Agreement operational. We need to review the first cycle of NDCs because the landmark was 2020. In 2020, all the countries that have ratified the Paris Agreement had to submit an updated NDC. But not all the countries did that. In our region, only 5 countries have submitted their updated NDCs. They are the UAE, by order of date, okay? The UAE, followed by Morocco, followed by the state of Palestine, followed by Tunisia, and the latest one was Oman. 5 countries until now, as we speak, have updated their national determined contribution and submitted that at the Secretariat of the United States UNFCCC. So we need to accelerate our actions. Accelerate the fight against climate change, and cutting global emissions remains the only remedy to fight climate change. I will repeat this phrase. Cutting global emissions remains the only remedy to fight climate change. Phase out from coal, decarbonize the world economy by 2050, use the opportunity of Article 6 of the Paris Agreement is the mission of the state parties, the negotiators in one hand, at COP26, but it's also the mission and the advocacy work that the non-state actors will have to do at COP26 in Glasgow, if they have the chance to be there, if the pandemic allows that. So this is the important things that we need. As a conclusion, we need a strong mobilization of all non-state actors toward the climate. Non-state actors must construct strong partnership with international organizations and donors. And they need to know that they can also receive funds from international funding agencies. They need to go look for it. Solidarity between regions and territories need to be there to turn climate threats into opportunities. And the role of the university, and our virtual learning university is one good example, is essential because it can have a mobilizing effect on the climate actions. And I thank you very much, and sorry if I was long, and thank you for listening, and back to you, Professor Innawi. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I would like to see Ustad Salim on the screen.
I'm there.
So please go ahead and
Okay.
manage the discussion. Thank you.
Inshallah. Thank you, Professor Khalid Temsamani, for the important and excellent lecture. Let's move now to the Q&A session, and we will start. Who wants to raise his hand? We have Professor Hassan Al-Barri. Please, Professor Hassan, you can start, please. And who wants to write his question also or comments, you can write it in the chat, or you can talk also about it. Yes, please. Prof. Hassan, go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for the Virtual Learning University for this conference. Thank you very much to Professor Temsamani for his very important conference. The climate change is a very complicated problem. Because first, there is problem of justice, the lack of justice between countries. I have two questions to the conference, Professor. The first one about adaptation, climate change adaptation. I think in virtual learning university, our next generation, young students, need to learn more about the adaptation, because the big problem for us is the adaptation. Even if we reduce the greenhouse emission, it will not be a big influence effect globally. Knowing that more four countries in the world, the big emitter, emit more than 55% of greenhouse gas, more than the 50. So what we need to learn in MENA region or in Africa is to learn how to adapt to the flooding phenomenon, to sea level, to water scarcity. I mean, the extremal climatic phenomenon. So I think this is the priority for our countries. This is the first question. The second question is about the Clean Development Mechanism project, which could be a good opportunity for developing countries to implement, for example, landfill gas capture and valorization to improve waste management and addressing climate change. But when we see the data, the statistic, we see that more than 70 projects of CDM projects are implemented by Latin America. In Africa and MENA, less than 5% project. So my question, how to increase this project in our region to reduce greenhouse gas and to protect our environment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Hassan Al-Barri. Yes. Do you want other question, or you will? Yes, you can answer straightforward. Your mic.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Okay. Okay. In fact, thank you, Professor Hassan Barry, for these two excellent questions. Very, very important. The first one is related to climate change adaptation. Our countries in the region are not big emitters, as I have explained already, less than 6% in greenhouse gas emissions, and they are suffering more from climate change than anything else, especially with extreme weather events. I have not mentioned an important article in my talk today, because perhaps it was not really the purpose, but you have to know that within the Paris Agreement, there is an article, which is the Article 7, which is related to adaptation, but who has an important component, who is called the Global Goal on Adaptation, the GGA. The Global Goal on Adaptation, do you hear people or international communities or webinars where people speak about that? I'm afraid not. I am speaking about that because I am among a group of experts in Africa, in which Africa is very vulnerable, like the MENA region, toward climate change. And Article 7 is one article that we are discussing several years ago in order for us to have a clear idea about the African group or the G77, how we will have to reach the GGA within the Paris Agreement. Because if there is a temperature goal within the Paris Agreement, you can measure the temperature, the emissions. You cannot measure the adaptation. So the bad thing about Article 7 is that we speak about a GGA, a global goal on adaptation, but how we're going to get there, nobody knows how to get there. It is up to the countries to do what they want to adapt. And this is bad. So we need to take care of this Article 7 and say, okay, you know what Article 7 say in the Paris Agreement? It say that it is a pivotal component of the Paris Agreement, pointing the world toward enhancing adaptive capacity. So the countries need to enhance their capacity, strengthen resilience, and reduce their vulnerability to climate change, all within the context of limiting global temperature to 1.5 degrees C. But how to do that? We need to do an exercise nationally and regionally, why not, to see what do we need to reach that. So for that, and this is linked to the second question, the climate finance is very, very important. When I said that the developed country need to put on the table, starting 2020, every year, $100 billion, this is serious. This is a pledge. This is a commitment by developed countries toward to do what? To adapt, to build resilient infrastructures in our countries. But the problem, Professor Hassan Barry, and I hope you can help me in that, and all the colleagues, the university colleagues, the researchers, is to say, when you present a proposal, a project for the Green Climate Fund, for example, to get funding, to build a resilient infrastructure, to initiate a project in your country, we tend to forget that the Green Climate Fund will not give you $1 if your project is only a development project. For example, you submit a proposal, I want to build a dam, barrage, a dam, يعني بالعربية
water storage.
لا بالعربية، كنخلي على الكلمة بالعربية، باللغة العربية.
سد
يعني باللغة العربية السد. انا بغيت نبني واحد السد في البلاد باش نجمع الماء، باش نعطي الماء للعالم القروي, to the poor population that is really vulnerable because of the droughts. This proposal will not be funded by the GCF, never, because for the GCF, this is a development project. It has nothing to do with decreasing your greenhouse gas emissions. هو المشكل فين كاين. It's a serious problem. So we need to build capacities, national capacities, and the university can do a lot of things to overcome this problem, to build capacities of our government people in the ministries, to make them understand that when they prepare bankable projects, they need to insert somewhere a component related to how I will decrease my greenhouse gas emissions. And one of the best examples in Morocco, because Morocco maybe is one of the countries in the country that has received a lot of money from the greenhouse gas emissions. And we hope that other countries will follow, because it's very important. It's the example of the Shtuka Ait Baha desalination plant in Agadir. I guess my friend Jawad Al-Kharraz told a word about it yesterday in his speech. The Shtuka Ait Baha desalination plant in Agadir is a mega project in Morocco. It's a desalination project that has been start to be operationalized last July, I guess. It's a project that is, one, using desalination, using renewable energy, and ensuring food security for the population. So the water that is being desalinated will serve to do irrigation, will serve to bring potable water for population, and will increase the food security for the population. This project can be supported by the Green Climate Fund because it has a renewable energy component. So when we tailor projects in our various countries, we need to keep in mind that the international funding institutions, not only the Green Climate Fund, other institutions like the eBird and others, they will look at the details of your project in order to fund it. So that's answer, Mr. Barry. Your second question is, we have to increase capacities to be able to attract more climate funding flow. There are many other examples that I don't want to. I want to keep to leave it to the colleagues to ask questions. So I will leave it there, and I'm happy to answer additional questions. Thank you. Back to you, Dr. Salim.
Thank you, Professor Khalid. Let's go for others. Here, Mr. Ahmed الناوي, he's saying, أشكرك على حديثك الممتاز وكل المعلومات التي قدمتها للجمهور مع الكثير من الخبرة في مجال العلوم والتواصل. الموضوع مهم للغاية للعالم العربي والمغرب. أتمنى أن أراكم قريبا وكثير من النجاح في مهمتك النبيلة. Mr. Abdul Samad Ibrahim, thank you, Dr. Khalid. It was a very informative presentation, and he is asking why 1.5 degree is assumed. Is the consequence are considered at this condition, sea, water, level, etc., are planned according as criteria? This is his question. Please.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Sam. Yeah, I have already mentioned during my talk today that initially the international community, state parties, had in mind, and it was coming from Copenhagen COP, that 2 degrees C was the good thing for everybody. 2 degrees C is global warming by the end of the century is what we need. But scientific evidence that has been released via the IPCC's report 1.5 degrees C, released right after, it was in 2018, after COP22 in Marrakesh, the mission of IPCC was the following. The COP asked IPCC to say, please make an international literature review and bring me scientific evidence, a comparative scientific evidence in between how the world will evolve under 2 degrees C scenario, okay, and how it will evolve if the scenario is a 1.5 degrees C target temperature, and make a comparison of those two. And IPCC in his special 1.5 report showed by scientific evidence that under the situation under 2 degrees C is going to be much worse than under 1.5 degrees C, especially in terms of sea level rise, in terms of droughts, extreme weather events, etc. So under 1.5 degrees C is much more better, especially for those small islands states in the Pacific that are living under the sea level. So that's very important. So it's a scientific evidence. I hope I have responded to the question of our friend.
Thank you, Prof. Dr. Nasser Mohammed Al-Masri, please welcome.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. شكرا أخوي سالم. شكرا دكتور خالد. طال عمرك أنا قاعد أستمع بعناية لك ولكل إخواني اللي تحدثوا بالسابق من بداية اليوم الأول إلى اليوم. الأدلة العلمية واضحة. هناك تغير جذري في المناخ على مستوى العالم. هناك تلوث بيئي، هناك نحر، هناك ارتفاع لمياه البحر، هناك حروب مياه قادمة، هناك تلوث بيئي كبير قد يؤدي إلى ما يسمى باللجوء البيئي. تكنولوجيا متوفرة، الحاجة ماسة إلى ما يسمى بالطاقات المتجددة، السيارات الكهربائية، كل شيء قاعد أتكلم عنه شيء رائع جدا. طيب وبعدين من سيتخذ القرار؟ هل هناك دول ستتخذ القرار بالنيابة عنا مثل كوب 26؟ هل هي اتفاقيات دولية ممكن تؤدي إلى تطورنا بطريقة أو بأخرى، أو نحن أصحاب الأرض أصحاب البلد ممكن نتخذ القرار؟ ومن الذي سيتخذ القرار؟ السيد الرئيس، الأمير، الملك، مجلس النواب، الشعب، جمعيات النفع العام؟ من سيمول ماذا ومتى وكيف؟ طيب أنت ذكرت في أبسط مثال على ذلك قضية محطة معالجة مياه البحر في المغرب. هناك حاجة ماسة الماء العذب، هناك أمن غذائي، هناك تخفيف من التلوث البيئي، هناك صناعة لفرص العمل، نقل للتكنولوجيا، تحقيق أهداف التنمية المستدامة 17 هدف على الأقل، هناك أيضا كاربون كريدت، هناك انفستمنت وفي ريتيل لها أشياء كثيرة. ومع ذلك لازلنا نعاني يا دكتور. كيف نحل هذه المشكلة من المغرب إلى المشرق؟ كيف نتخلص من التلوث البيئي الموجود؟ أنا طرحت أمس سؤال، يوم أنت عارف أنك أنت قاعد تلوث بيئيا، ليش تدعم المشتقات النفطية؟ ليش تدعم السيارات التقليدية؟ ليش ما تجيب سيارات الهايبريد أو الكهرباء؟ طيب ليش ما تروح حق مفاعلات الهيدروجين؟ طيب ليش ما تستخدم غاز الميثان بدل ما تحرق النفط والغاز؟ طيب ليش ما تستخدم الشمس؟ ما احنا مرحله ما قبل جهنم من الحراره اللي احنا عايشينها بالكويت وبالعالم العربي، من الحراره الهائله من الشمس. طيب ليش يعني انا قاعد اسال ليش هذا كله احنا متعطلين الى الان ما اتخذنا القرار، الى الان ماخذين الامور ببساطه، وقاعد نشوف العالم كله قاعد يتغير. اليوم الحروب اللي ممكن توقع الان، اثيوبيا تقطع الماء عن مصر والسودان، ايران تقطع نهر الكارون عن العراق وعن دول الخليج، تركيا عندها نفس المشكلة، إسرائيل عدو استراتيجي، وإيران عدو استراتيجي، وأثيوبيا عدو استراتيجي. طيب ما العمل؟ إحنا الحين كناس متخصصين ما الذي نستطيع فعله لإيصال آرائنا إلى من يسمون بمتخذ القرار داخل أوطاننا، أو إلى من يضغط على متخذ القرار في أوطاننا عليهم ونخلص؟ يعني ودي أسمع وجهة نظرك طال عمرك، لأن صراحة ملينا، قدمنا كل الحلول ولا زلنا ننتظر ماذا؟ ما أدري. الطامة الكبرى قيامتنا الله اعلم. جزاك الله خير. تفضل دكتور.
شكرا دكتور ناصر. تفضل بروفيسور خالد.
شكرا لك دكتور ناصري. وصراحة أنا يعني تدخلك كان مهم جدا، ويا ريت أغلب الإخوان والأخوات اللي من المجتمع المدني ومن الجامعات ومن الخبراء اللي غادي يحضروا الكوب 26 بغلاسكو يكون عندهم هذا الحماس ويدافعوا على الحقوق الدول التي تعاني من آفات التغيرات المناخية، والتي ليس لها ولا يعني مسؤولية في تتدهور داخليا بسبب هذيك الدول اللي هي تعطينا الغازات وتقذف بغازاتها نحونا. فشكرا على هذا السؤال. فأول حاجة دكتور، هو الجواب في عدة مستويات الصراحة. سؤالك كان من سيتخذ القرار؟ أولا القرار خاصو يتخاذ على الصعيد الدولي في إطار المنتظم الدولي، يعني الكوب اللي هي المؤتمر الأطراف للتغيرات المناخية دابا هذا ديال غلاسكو. يعني أنا ممكن أن أقول لك بأن هذه ممكن آخر فرصة للمنتظم الدولي باش تكون هناك تحرك تجاه 1.5 درجة مئوية، ونقلصوا ذاك الجاب ديال 23 إلى 26 جيجا طن ثاني أكسيد الكربون. راه كبير جدا في 8 سنوات ولا 10 سنوات. هل بإمكاننا نقلصوا هذا العدد، الكمية الهائلة من ثاني أكسيد الكربون؟ أنا بالنسبة لي إلى ما يكونش هناك نشتغل يد في يد جميع الدول وتكون هناك إرادة سياسية حقيقية لرؤساء الدول في هذا الميدان، سوف لن نصل إلى عرض الحائط. هذا من جهة. فأولا. ثانيا المستوى الثاني، أنا أقول بأن دولة على الصعيد الوطني يجب تكون إرادة سياسية وطنية تمشي في اتجاه السياسة الدولية ديال الكوب، سياسة وطنية باستراتيجية وطنية وبمشاريع وطنية التي تظهر للعالم أن هناك فعلا رغبة، نية حسنة في اتجاه التقليص من الانبعاثات وفي اتجاه إيجاد بيئة مرونة يعني adaptation، مرونة الساكنة والمواطنين والإنسان لمواجهة هذه الآفات الطبيعية. هذا من جهة إرادة سياسية ونية حسنة. ثانيا، لنفرض كاينه هناك نية حسنة لكن يقول لك ما كاينش إمكانيات، ما كاينش كذا. المستوى الثالث هو موضوع محاضرتي اليوم. هو المستوى الثالث، هو الفاعل الغير الحكومي، وخاصة أنا أقول البلاد أو البلدان اللي ما فيهاش مجتمع مدني قوي سوف تعاني من آفات التغيرات المناخية. دور المجتمع المدني يجب أن يتقوى وأن يكون قوياً للضغط على الدولة وعلى الحكومة، وهذا هو ما حصل عندنا في المغرب. من بين الأمورات لما كانت هناك التشارتر، يعني الميثاق الوطني للتنمية المستدامة الذي أعلن عنه صاحب الجلالة الملك محمد السادس في أواخر 2011 في بداية 2011، لما قال أنا غدا سوف نقوم بنقاش حر وبناء وطني اللي غنسميوه الميثاق الوطني للبيئة والتنمية المستدامة، واستمر تقريبا لمدة سنة نقاشات. المجتمع المدني شارك فيها بقوة والجامعة شاركت فيها بقوة من أجل بلورة واحد تصور وطني اللي فيه تقريبا 2600 توصية اللي طلعت للمستوى الوطني على الصعيد الحكومي من أجل صياغة قانون وطني اللي سميناه قانون 92/12 قانون إطار للميثاق الوطني التنموي، واللي انبثق عنه مجموعة من القوانين بما فيها شرطة البيئة اظن بان من اوائل الدول العربيه اللي فيها شرطه البيئه كان المغرب، ممكن في الامارات اظن، اللي الشرطه تعمل يعني تخرج للشارع وتشوف ماذا يحصل من ناحيه تلوث الهواء الى اخره. فالمجتمع المدني والفاعل الغير الحكومي نون ستيت اكتورز كان له دور كبير في بلورة هذه القوانين. هذا من جهه. اذا سؤالك من سيتخذ القرار؟ بطبيعه الحال السياسي هو الذي سوف يتخذ القرار، لكن السياسي بدون فاعل غير حكومي وبدون مجتمع مدني اظن انه الامور سوف لن تمشي في المسار الصحيح. وبالتالي في بلادنا العربيه لازم المجتمع المدني يكون له دور. ونعطيك مثال المغرب، وهذا شيء غريب جدا، ان لما كنمشيو للكوب كل سنه النسبه المئويه تاع المجتمع المدني المغربي الذي يشارك، وبعض الاوقات اسطر على هذه، من ماله الخاص. هذا صدقوني المجتمع المدني في بعض الاوقات يشارك في الكوب من ماله الخاص، ما فيش تمويلات، لاجل انه يمشي ويترافع من اجل قضيه البيئه والتغير المناخيه. شيء غريب جدا. ممكن تسالوا الاخوان اللي كيمشيو من بلادكم ان المجتمع المدني يكون قوي جدا في كل كوب. وهذه السنه كان عندنا اجتماع مؤخرا، هذه السنه الناس ماشيين بمالهم الخاص، من مالهم الخاص ليشاركوا. هذا غريب جدا، لكن اتمنى ان يكون ضغوطات هذه السنه، لان هذه الفرصه الاخيره. هذه الفرصه الاخيره باش الحكومات يعملوا لنا صياغه ارتيكل 6 of the Paris Agreement ويعطينا فكره على الارتيكل 7 ويشدوا يعني ينتهوا من صياغه الباريس رول بوك والكاتوفيتشي باكج باش نبداو نشتغلوا، نبداو ننزلوا الى الارض الواقع تنزيل اتفاق باريس. لان اتفاق باريس مازال فيه مشاكل. وفي مدريد كانت فرصه ضائعه في مدريد، مع كل احتراماتي للاخوان تاع اسبانيا وكوستا، يعني اللي كان غيكون في لاتينو امريكا. يعني ما فرصه ضائعه. اموال تخسرت، اموال طائله للتنظيم وللفنادق والاكل والشرب والتنقل الى اخره، ولكن بدون نتيجه. دابا اليوم concretely speaking في بلادنا العربيه لازم الدول التي تنتج النفط أن تكون عندها إرادة سياسية أن تطور الطاقات المتجددة، وسوف لن تندم عليها، لأن الطاقات الأحفورية في انقراض مستمر. أكررها ونعودها. شوفوا شنو وقع في جارتنا الجزائر في المخزون ديال الغاز اللي الآن ينقرض. هل لازم يكون هناك بديل طاقات متجدده وتنقل نظيف، الكتريكال موبيليتي الى اخره. والاستاذ الناوي خبير اكثر مني في هذا المجال، يعني يقدر عنده كلمه في هذا المجال. الرينوبلز هو الحل الوحيد. نخرجوا من الطاقات الاحفوريه 2050 كاربون نوتراليتي في 2050. هذا هو الشعار، كاربون نوتراليتي في 2050. in order to get that، باش نوصلوا ل 2050 ماذا نفعل؟ نعطيك مثال على بلادي المغرب، ينتهي من صياغه low emission development strategy 2050 ننتهي منها، وبدينا نشتغل الان. سياستنا الطاقيه من هنا ل 2030 لازم يكون عندنا 52% من الانتاج الطاقي يكون نظيف في المغرب. صعب جدا، لكن نشتغل اليه. كل المكونات في البلد تشتغل في هذا. وسأخليها هنا. أتمنى دكتور الناصري أنني نكون جاوبت على سؤالك، وشكرا لكم.
شكرا بروفيسور خالد and thank you all. شكرا أيضا دكتور ناصر. I think Professor Ahmed he has a comment also in this.
in Nawi, yeah?
I mean in Nawi, yes, Professor Ahmed.
Okay, I just want to make because virtual learning university is interactive. The university, I want to do some interactive job. So please allow me to share my screen. I think you just see the black, is it?
Yes.
Okay. Then I will go to my stuff here. And this is not very good. So let's see, make the black, no. You see how it's difficult to work in interactive. So I have to make the white one. I will make one axis here. This axis is billion. It's difficult to write, but it's anyway we can understand. It's a billion of ton of emitted per year. Here's the other axis is years in 1990, I will write here. Then I will make now 2020 and 2040. Yeah. So I don't have the good facility in order to make things very makeup. And let's see here. I think it was 50 billion of ton, approximately, in 1990, what we have emitted in the atmosphere. Then we don't stop. Unfortunately, we increase it, and in 2020 we had a lot. The number is not so important now, but the important is the idea. So at this point here in 2020, we have to choose. Either we go business as usual, so we increase the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and of course it's a catastrophe. We will have problem, and we have already some. Or we hold this. This means, as Professor Khalid said, we have to make a lot of renewable energy, carbon-free industry. So we hold. So we will just let the nature doing the job and making things better, and with the plant and the etc. We can maybe absorb the CO2 in the atmosphere, also fixation by the industry. Or if we are very clever, we cut what we have. So there are many ways in the industry to do this in order that we avoid the catastrophe. And I think scientists, political maker, industry, private have to work on this. And in my opinion, if we are clever in our planet, we don't have another one. We have only one planet. And if it's gone, then it's gone. We have to cut the billion of ton which we make every year. So we have to work in different azimuth. One is to use renewable energy and the carbon-free economy, etc. And the second, to use method where we can make the atmosphere empty of carbon dioxide. And there are methods. But the political decision is the key. The political decision is the key on all this. So with this, I just want to tell you how I see the problem and also how it has to be resolved. So thank you very much. I will leave the screen now. And if you want to continue to discuss, welcome.
Thank you, Professor Ahmed. Professor Khalid, do you want to say something, or I move?
No, I think my colleague Professor Nawi just made a compliment which is very, very important. So in a graph, you see that we have no choice than cutting our emissions, reaching the carbon neutrality by 2050. Plus that, by 2030, which is 8 years from now almost, we need to cut the emissions by 40%. 5%. How we can do that? We cannot do that without using renewables, and we cannot do that without stopping using fossil fuels. And it is a political question. This is a political question. Let's stay in our region. Let's discuss among Arabs. نناقشوا بين احنا اخوان عرب ومسلمين. هل نحن راضين على هذا الوضع؟ لان احنا عندنا فيضانات، عندنا موجات حراره. الاخ من الكويت، وانا زرت الكويت، بلد عزيز علينا، جميع الدول عزيزه علينا. في مشكل تاع تحليه المياه، مشكل تاع الحراره، تاع يعني بعض المرات الفرشات المائيه كيدخل لها diffusion of salt ground water. there is a salt diffusion من البحر، وهذا يجعل ان المياه غير صالحه للشرب وغير صالحه للزراعه والفلاحه. فاحنا كعرب اللي حنا حد الان نقدر نقولوا غير مسؤولين على اتخاذ القرار، لكن ماذا يمكن هذه الجامعه الافتراضيه تاعنا VLU تفعله من اجل حل هذه المعضله وهذه المشكله؟ هل وهذا سؤال موضوع للجميع، مطروح للجميع، هل كجامعه افتراضيه او كجامعيين بصفه عامه وكمجتمع مدني وكخبراء، هل في عالمنا العربي عندنا القدره، عندنا الكفاءه اننا ناثر على السياسات الوطنيه؟ اذا كان هناك جواب، اذا كان الجواب نعم، قولوا لنا كيفاش نفعل. فكل واحد فينا عنده طريقته العمل. هذا الشيء اللي كنعملوه اليوم، هذه المحاضره ديال اليوم، هذا النقاش اليوم، هو طريقه ديال التاثير بطبيعه الحال ايجابيه، لكن طرق اخرى، هناك طرق اخرى. النقاش مع الطلبه بتاعنا في المدرجات، المحاضرات اللي كنعطيوها داخل الجامعه، نحن مؤثرين. يعني لما يكون عندك طلبه 200 ولا 150 ولا 300 ولا 400 طالب في المدرج يستمعون لك ويصمتوا لك ويثقون فيك كأستاذ جامعي، يثقون فيك. هذا مهم، أن الطلبة بعض المرات يثقون فيما يقوله الأستاذ. فالأستاذ لازم أنه يعطي the right message، يعطي الرسالة تكون اللي عندها impactant message. لما نأثروا على 300 طالب في ظرف ساعة ونصف من المحاضرة، هذا رأي إيجابي. أنا الآن بعض الأوقات، أنا عندي 32 سنة في التدريس على فكرة، بعض الأوقات كنكون في المطار فألقى شرطي طالب تاعي، ولا دركي طالب تاعي، ولا سائق تاكسي في بلد، ولا في وزارة، مسؤول في وزارة. فهذو طلبة، هذو ناس انت كونتيهم، فهم غادي ياخذوا المشعل ويمشيوا كذلك انهم يؤدوا المهمة اللي انت مررتيها. فلازم اننا يكون عندنا نقاش في يوم اخر ممكن مع الدكتور ناوي، كيف احنا ممكن اننا ناثروا على سياسنا العموميه. وهنا اظن الدكتوره جميله اذا كانت معنا الان مع الفريق بتاعها في الشق الثاني من VLU غيلعب دور كبير في الطريق في الجانب الحقوقي القانوني، في الجانب human sciences political sciences history geography. هذه الميادين مهمه جدا 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 في الجامعه الافتراضيه، لانهما غادي يكملوا العمل اللي حنا كنبداوه. حنا كنبداو العمل العلمي والتقني، لكن هما غادي يكملوا، غادي يعملوا ان بابي كادو. يعني they will envelope our speech to put it understandable by the politicians. هادشي اللي بغيت نقول، وشكرا.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
تفضل بروفيسور أحمد.
I think I'm very afraid, and I apologize that we have a speaker waiting in the pipeline.
Right.
And we have to give him the floor after a few seconds. And therefore, I want to thank Professor Khalid Temsamani for this wonderful and awesome talk. And it's come in the time, because there is this Glasgow conference, because every day we see the impact of climate change, of temperature, etc. And I think we will have him every time. He's welcome to give his opinion and to give us some news. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. It was a pleasure.
I wish you a lot of success when you go to Glasgow, and you bring us some some news from there.